My mother laughed in my face at the engagement dinner, treating me like a glitch in her perfect family. My brother looked away, but his fiancée just quietly Googled my name. Her expression shifted instantly, not because of my success, but because the results linked a fraud investigation directly to my mother's signature charity. I did not return tonight for their approval. I came back because I finally had the proof of exactly what they were hiding. My name is Gianna Armstrong, and I was currently sitting in a dining room that smelled of expensive lavender polish and passive-aggressive silence, trying to remember the specific breathing exercises I had learned in therapy. The air in my mother's house in Cedar Hollow always felt thinner than anywhere else on Earth, as if the oxygen itself was being rationed based on net worth and social standing. The dinner was technically a celebration. My brother Grant had finally proposed to Tessa Wynne, a sharp-eyed woman with a jawline that suggested stubbornness and a resume that suggested intelligence. The table was set with the kind of aggressive perfection Marianne Armstrong was famous for in our corner of Nashville. Crystal glasses that chimed like church bells when you touched them, heavy silverware that felt like weapons in your hand, a roast that had been garnished within an inch of its life. It was a scene from a magazine lit by the warm golden glow of a chandelier that cost more than my first car. And I was the stain on the tablecloth. Grant has always been the ambitious one, my mother said, her voice smooth like butter melting over a hot knife. She did not look at me. She was looking at Tessa, beaming with a pride that felt rehearsed. Even when he was a boy, always leading the team, always the captain. It is no surprise he is vice president of sales now. We just knew he was destined for it. Grant smiled. That practice. Easy smile that had gotten him out of speeding tickets and failing grades his entire life. He took a sip of the red wine, a vintage bottle my father had opened 20 minutes ago to let it breathe. Mom, you are exaggerating, Grant said, though his tone suggested he wanted her to continue. I never exaggerate about talent, Marianne insisted. She finally flicked her gaze toward me. It was a quick darting look, the kind you give a piece of furniture that is slightly out of place. Some children just have that spark, that drive to be someone, and others, well, others are just happy to be spectators. I tightened my grip on the stem of my wine glass. My knuckles turned white. I counted backward from 10 in my head. 10, 9, 8. Do not react. Giving her a reaction is like feeding a stray cat. She will just keep coming back for more. Gianna made it down from Seattle, though. My father Darren said his voice was quiet. It always was. He was a man who had learned 30 years ago that silence was the only way to survive in this house without shrapnel wounds. That is a long flight. Oh, please. My mother waved her hand, dismissing the 3,000 miles I had traveled as if I had merely walked in from the garage. It is not like she had anything important to reschedule. It is just Seattle and it is just Gianna. The room went quiet. It was not a comfortable silence. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a vacuum sealing shut. I took a bite of the roast. It tasted like cardboard. This was the dynamic. This had always been the dynamic. Grant was the golden sun around which the Armstrong solar system revolved, and I was Pluto, cold, distant, and barely considered a planet. For years, I had accepted this. I had played the role of the shadow because it was easier than trying to shine and being told I was too dim. But tonight felt different. Maybe it was because I was 36 years old now. Maybe it was because I had spent the last decade rebuilding myself from the ground up in a city where no one knew Marianne Armstrong. Or maybe it was because of what was sitting in the encrypted folder on my laptop back at the hotel. So Gianna, Tessa said. Her voice cut through the tension like a razor. It was the first time she had spoken directly to me since the appetizers. She was looking at me. Really looking at me with a furrowed brow. Grant told me, "You live in the Pacific Northwest. I actually have never been. What keeps you up there, work?" I opened my mouth to answer, but my mother laughed. It was a light tinkling sound, terrifyingly polite. "Oh, Tessa. Darling. Do not bore yourself." Gianna does paperwork, office admin things, filing, sorting. You know how some people just need a quiet little job to get by. That is our Gianna. She prefers to stay in the background. It is less demanding for her. The insult was wrapped in so much faux concern. It almost sounded like affection. Almost. Actually. I started. My voice steady. Despite the rapid drumming of my heart against my ribs. It is a bit more complex than that. She works for a bureau. Grant interrupted. Helping himself to more potatoes. He did not mean to be malicious. I don't think he was just so used to the narrative Mom wrote that he read the lines automatically. Checking receipts or something. Right? Gee. Right? I said. Letting the word hang there. I picked up my glass again. Something like that. Tessa did not move on. She did not smile politely and turned back to the golden boy. She was watching the interaction with the calculation of a hawk spotting a disturbance in the grass. She looked from my mother's dismissive smirk to my father's lowered eyes and then to Grant's oblivious chewing. Something did not add up for her. You guys never talk about her. Tessa said it was not an accusation. Just an observation. Stated flatly. I mean, we have been dating for 2 years. Grant. You talk about your mom's charity galas. You talk about your dad's golf handicap. But whenever I ask about your sister, you just say she is doing her own thing. 'Cause she is. Marian said. Her smile tightening at the corners. The mask was slipping just a fraction of an inch. She is just a nobody really, and that is fine. Not everyone is meant to be special. We love her anyway. She is just a nobody. The words hit the center of the table like a dead bird. My father winced. He actually flinched, staring down at his plate. Grant paused mid-chew, sensing that perhaps the line had been crossed. But he said nothing. He never said anything. I felt the old shame flare up, the heat rising in my neck. It was the same heat I felt when I was 12. And she threw away my art project because it cluttered the counter. The same heat from when I was 18. And she told me not to apply to the Ivy League schools because I would only embarrass myself with the rejection letters. But then the heat cooled. It turned into something icy and hard in my stomach. I looked at my mother. I really looked at her. I saw the desperate tightness of her facelift, the fear behind her eyes that someone somewhere might not think she was the most important woman in the room, and I realized that her cruelty was not about me. It was about her. She needed me to be small so she could feel big. Tessa, however, was done listening. I saw her hand slip below the tablecloth. The soft pale glow of a smartphone screen illuminated her lap, casting ghostly shadows on the heavy linen napkin. She was not texting. Her thumb was moving with purpose. What is the name of the company again? Tessa asked, her voice casual, though her eyes were darting down to her lap. Vesperline, I said softly. Vesperline Integrity Bureau. Sounds made up. My mother scoffed, slicing her meat with surgical precision. Probably one of those temp agencies or a call center. Tessa did not respond. She was typing. I saw her enter my name. Gianna Armstrong. The silence stretched out for 10 seconds. 20 seconds. The only sound was the scraping of silverware and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Then Tessa stopped moving. Under the table. Her hand froze. Her posture, which had been relaxed, suddenly stiffened. She sat up straighter, her shoulders pulling back. She blinked once, twice, as if she could not quite process what the pixels on her screen were arranging themselves into. She scrolled down. Then she scrolled back up. She looked at me across the centerpiece of white leaves. The look was not pity anymore. It was shock. And underneath the shock, there was a dawn of respect and fear. She had found it. She had found the profile on the firm's website. She had found the article from the Seattle Times from 6 months ago titled, "The Auditor Who Took Down the Bayside Ponzi Scheme." She had found the transcript from the Senate hearing where I testified as an expert witness on nonprofit financial structuring and embezzlement. She saw the title, Senior Forensic Investigator. She saw the credentials, Certified Fraud Examiner, Forensic Accountant, and then she must have seen the other thing, the thing that brought me here tonight. I saw her eyes widen. She tapped a link. The color drained slightly from her face. She looked from her phone to my mother, then back to the phone. The connection was there in black and white on the glowing screen. A cross-reference, a related entity. My name. Referenced in a preliminary inquiry file regarding a specific charitable organization, the Cedar Hollow Hope Gala. My mother was oblivious. She was busy pouring herself another glass of wine, unaware that the ground beneath her feet had just turned into quicksand. Anyway, for the wedding, I was thinking we need to import the orchids from Thailand. I know it is expensive, $5,000 or $10,000 more. But the local florists just do not have the vision. Do you agree, Tessa? Tessa did not answer about the orchids. She slowly withdrew her hand from under the table. She placed her phone face down on the tablecloth right next to her untouched wine glass. The sound of the phone hitting the wood was soft, but in that room, it sounded like a gunshot. Tessa stared at my mother. It was a long, hard stare. It was the look of a lawyer who has just realized her client is lying to her. Or worse, that she is sitting at dinner with a criminal. Mrs. Marianne, Tessa said. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried enough weight to stop my father's fork halfway to his mouth. My mother paused, smiling that plastic smile. Yes, dear. The orchids. No, Tessa said. She shook her head slightly, as if clearing a fog. She looked at me one last time, verifying the reality of the woman sitting across from her against the digital footprint she had just uncovered. Then she turned her gaze back to the matriarch of the Armstrong family. Mrs. Marianne, Tessa repeated louder this time. Do you have any idea what your daughter actually does for a living? The silence that followed Tessa's question at the dinner table was not new to me. I had lived in that specific frequency of silence for 18 years. It was the sound of the Armstrong household when the script went off the rails. The quiet panic before my mother, Marianne, yelled, cut and reset the scene. Growing up in Cedar Hollow, our family was never just a family. We were a production. My mother was the director, producer, and lead actress in a lifelong performance of suburban perfection. She was the woman who baked cookies for the new neighbors before the moving van had even parked. Not because she was kind, but because she wanted to be the first to set the narrative. She was the woman who organized the charity drives, the book clubs, and the homeowner association meetings. She was the sun, burning bright and demanding gravity. Then there was Grant. My brother was the co-star. He was born with the kind of golden retriever charm that made people want to give him things. Great job. Forgiveness. He was the light of the house if Grant sneezed. My mother was there with a handkerchief and a pot of homemade soup. If Grant scored a goal in Pee-wee soccer, it was discussed at dinner for 3 weeks. And then there was me. I was the extra. The background character who was necessary to fill out the census data, but otherwise useless to the plot. I was the prop that did not quite fit the concept my mother had designed for her life. I remember being 10 years old. It was a Tuesday in November. Gray and drizzly. I had come home from school with a certificate in my backpack. It was for a statewide math competition. I had placed first. I had beaten kids 2 years older than me. I remember the feeling of the heavy cardstock in my hands, the gold foil seal at the bottom. I felt a strange bubbling sensation in my chest that I later identified as pride. I walked into the kitchen. My mother was on the phone aggressively chopping carrots. She was organizing the Fall Harvest Festival, and the tent rental company had OM. I held up the paper. She did not look up. Not now. Gianna. Can you not see I am in a crisis? The 10 people are incompetent. But I won, I whispered. She sighed. A long exasperated sound that deflated my chest instantly. She pointed the knife toward the granite island. Put it there. I will look at it later. I put the certificate on the counter. I sat there for 3 days. Eventually, it was buried under a stack of catalogs and unpaid bills. When I finally cleared the pile to find it, the corner was stained with coffee rings. I threw it in the trash myself. No one ever asked where it went. Contrast that with the following Saturday. Grant had a regional soccer game. It was pouring rain. The wind was howling. But the entire Armstrong apparatus mobilized. My father packed the cooler with Gatorade. My mother packed sandwiches cut into triangles. We drove 2 hours. We stood in the mud. My mother screamed his name until her voice was when he made a mediocre pass that resulted in an assist. She turned to the parents next to her and beamed. That is my boy. That is Grant. I stood under a broken umbrella, shivering, watching them watch him. I realized then that love in this family was not a right. It was a currency. And I was bankrupt. My father Darren was not a bad man in the way villains in movies are bad. He did not yell. He did not hit. He just disappeared. He had mastered the art of being present physically while checking out mentally. He was a piece of furniture that occasionally read the newspaper. I used to think he was a victim of my mother's tyranny, too, until I realized his silence was a choice. He saw how she treated me. He saw the way she criticized my hair, my clothes, my quietness. He saw her edit me out of stories she told to friends. You are too sensitive, he would say when I came to him, tears stinging my eyes after one of Mom's verbal lashings. He would not look at me. He would look at the television. Your mother just wants the best for you. Don't make a scene. Gianna. Just keep the peace. Keeping the peace meant letting Marian Armstrong rewrite reality. Everything was a stage for her. The Parent-Teacher Association, the Garden Club, the Church Council. She needed everything to look right. I was the glitch. I was too serious. I read too much. I did not have Grant's easy smile or his athletic build. I was lanky, sharp-elbowed and observant. Smile. Gianna. She would hiss before we walked into a party. You look like you at a funeral. People will think you are unhappy. I am unhappy, I said once when I was 14. She stopped in the middle of the driveway. She did not slap me. She did something worse. She looked at me with cold, flat disappointment. Then fake it. Nobody likes a sour girl. You are embarrassing the family. That was the refrain. Don't embarrass the family. But the cracks were there. Even back then. I think that is why I became an auditor. I learned to spot the difference between what people said and what the data showed before I even knew what forensic accounting was. The pivotal moment happened when I was 16. My mother was running the Coats for Kids drive. It was a smaller precursor to the massive gala she ran now. She had piles of receipts in a ledger on the dining room table. She was complaining about the math, about how the numbers were giving her a migraine. Can help? I said. I wanted to be useful. I still stupidly wanted her approval. She hesitated, then pushed the ledger toward me. Fine. Just add up the vendor column and do not mess it up. I sat there for 2 hours. I loved the numbers. They made sense. They were clean. 2 plus 2 was always 4. It never pretended to be 5 to look better for the neighbors. But as I reconciled the vendor receipts with the bank withdrawal slips she had clipped to the page, I stopped. There was a recurring withdrawal. $300 here. $500 there. Checks written to cash. Checks written to a consultant that had the same last name as her hairdresser. I did the math 3 times. The charity account was short by nearly $2,000. I felt a cold pit in my stomach. I walked into the living room where she was watching television. Mom, I said, holding the book. I think there is a mistake. She did not look away from the screen. I told you the math is tricky. No. I said it is not the math. The math is right. The money is missing. There are checks here for things that aren't coats. This one test. Miller. Isn't that the lady who does your highlights? The room went dead silent. My mother turned her head slowly. The look on her face was not shame. It was fury. It was the look of a predator who realizes the prey has teeth. She stood up, walked over to me, and snatched the ledger from my hands. How dare you? She whispered. But the numbers. The numbers are none of your business. She snapped. You think you are so smart? You think you can just snoop through my things and accuse me? After everything I do for this community, I work my fingers to the bone, and this is the thanks I get. I am not accusing you. Stammered. Terrified. I just saw. You saw what you wanted to see. She hissed. Because you are jealous. You have always been jealous of how much people love me. You want to ruin it. You want to make us look bad. Darren. She shouted. My father appeared from the hallway looking weary. What is it? Your daughter. She pointed a manicured finger at me. Is accusing me of stealing from charity. She is trying to destroy this family's reputation. My father looked at me. I held my breath. Waiting for him to ask to see the book. Waiting for him to be the adult. He sighed. He looked at the floor. Gianna apologized to your mother. But Dad. I didn't apologize. He raised his voice. A rare sharp bark. Stop causing trouble. Why can't you just be normal? I stared at him. Then I stared at her. And something inside me finally broke. Not in a loud, shattering way, but in a quiet structural way. The beam that held up my hope for this family snapped. I am sorry I lied. Go to your room, my mother said, smoothing her blouse, and never touch my papers again. I spent the next 2 years as a ghost. I stopped talking at dinner. I stopped showing them my report cards. I stopped trying to be part of the picture. I focused entirely on my exit strategy. I saved every dollar I made babysitting. I studied until my eyes burned so I could get scholarships. Any scholarship that would take me far away from Tennessee. When I graduated high school, there was no party. Grant had gotten a party when he graduated. A catered barbecue with a DJ for me. We went to a chain restaurant for an hour. And my mother spent the whole time complaining about the service. 2 months later. Packed my car. A beat-up sedan I had bought from a neighbor. I did not make a speech. I did not scream at them. I just carried my boxes out to the driveway while my father was at work and my mother was in the garden. I had just put the last box in the trunk. My books. My few clothes. My laptop when I heard voices. My mother was by the hedges talking to Mrs. Gable next door. The window of my car was rolled down. Oh, is Jana leaving today? Mrs. Gable asked. Seattle. Right? That is a big move. I froze. My hand on the door handle. Yet, finally, my mother said. I could hear the smile in her voice. Honestly, it is a relief. She has always been difficult. No direction. No drive. Well, maybe she will find herself out there. Mrs. Gable said kindly. My mother laughed. It was the same laugh she had used at the engagement dinner tonight. Dismissive. Cruel. Oh, I doubt it. My mother said. Between you and me, she is just a nobody. She won't amount to anything. She will be back in 6 months, begging for money. You watch. I stood there in the humid Tennessee heat. My hand gripped the hot metal of the car door. I did not cry. I did not confront her. I got in the car. I turned the key. And as the engine sputtered to life, I made a vow to the windshield. I will never come back. And if I do, I will own the place. I drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. I spent the next 18 years making sure that when I did come back, I would not be the one begging. I just never guessed that the price of my return would be the destruction of the very reputation she valued more than my life. Seattle was everything Cedar Hollow was not. It was gray. It was wet. And it was aggressively indifferent to who my parents were. When I arrived, I did not have a trust fund or a safety net. I had a leaky studio apartment in the university district that smelled permanently of damp wool and roasted coffee, and I had never been happier. The first 3 years were a blur of caffeine and ambition. I worked 2 jobs to pay for my tuition. By day, I was a barista, memorizing complex drink orders with the same precision I used to memorize my mother's list of forbidden topics. By night, I was a security guard at an office building, sitting in a dim lobby with my textbooks spread out over the reception desk. I slept 4 hours a night. I ate instant noodles. My shoes had holes in the soles. But every time I paid my rent, $650 a month for 300 square feet, I felt a rush of power that no charity gala in Tennessee could ever buy. It was my money. It was my life. I stumbled into forensic accounting by accident. I was taking a general business course and we were analyzing the bankruptcy of a mid-sized retail chain. The professor was droning on about market forces, but I was looking at the appendices of the case study. The inventory depreciation numbers did not match the warehouse lease renewals. I raised my hand. Yet, the professor asked, looking annoyed, they didn't go bankrupt because of the market. I said, the CEO was leasing warehouses he owned personally back to the company at 3 times the market rate, and then writing off the inventory as damage to cover the cash flow gap. The room went silent. The professor blinked. He walked over to my desk, looked at my notes, and then looked at me. What is your name? He asked. Gianna. I said. Well, Gianna, he said. You have a very suspicious mind. Have you considered fraud examination? It turned out I had a talent for it. I had spent 18 years living in a house built on lies. I knew exactly what it looked like when someone was trying to curate a reality that did not exist. I knew that when the surface was too polished, the rot was usually just underneath. I devoured the curriculum. I got my degree. I passed the CPA exam on the first try. Then I went for the CF Certified Fraud Examiner. While Grant was getting promoted in sales because he could charm a client on a golf course, I was learning how to trace wire transfers through 3 different offshore jurisdictions. Then I found Vesperline. Vesperline Integrity Bureau was not a standard accounting firm. We did not do taxes for suburban dentists. We were the people you called when you suspected your CFO was buying a yacht with the employee pension fund. Our office was in a steel and glass tower overlooking the Puget Sound. It was quiet, serious, and brutally efficient. My boss, a terrifyingly competent woman named Sarah, hired me after a 10-minute interview. You are hungry, she told me. I like hungry. People with safety nets don't look at the details. They assume things will work out. You look like you expect the floor to drop out at any second. I usually do. I replied. Good, she said. That is how you catch them. My first big case was the one that put my name on the map. It was a non-profit organization that claimed to build wells in developing countries. On paper, they were saints. They had glossy brochures, celebrity endorsements, and a gala that rivaled anything my mother ever threw. But something was off. I spent 3 months living inside their spreadsheets. I tracked every donation. I cross-referenced every vendor and I found it. They were using a shell construction company. The company would invoice the charity for $50,000 to drill a well. The charity would pay it. The construction company would then subcontract the actual work to a local crew for $2,000. And the remaining $48,000 would disappear into a consulting firm owned by the charity director's brother-in-law. They had stolen $4 million. The hearing was in a federal courtroom in downtown Seattle. I was called as an expert witness. I remember sitting in the stand wearing a suit I had bought with my first real bonus. The defense attorney tried to rattle me. He tried to suggest I was misinterpreting the data, that I did not understand the complexities of international aid. I did not flinch. I did not apologize. I just projected a graph onto the screen. "This is the money coming in," I said, my voice steady. "And this is the money going out to an LLC registered to a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands. There is no complexity here. It is theft." The jury convicted them in 3 hours. After that, things changed. My name started appearing in industry journals. I was interviewed on a popular financial crime podcast. I spoke at a conference in Chicago about detecting red flags in nonprofit governance. If you type Gianna Armstrong fraud into a search engine, you got pages of results. I was not a celebrity, but in my world, I was a known quantity. I was respected. I was the person you called when you wanted the truth. No matter how ugly it was, I never hid any of this from my family. I did not change my name. I did not block them on social media. I just lived. Every now and then I would send an update, a text to Grant on his birthday, a card to my parents for their anniversary. I kept it polite. I kept it distant. About 2 years ago, right after the well water case broke in the news, there was a feature article about me in a national business magazine. The headline was "The Human Lie Detector." It was a good piece. It talked about my work ethic, my attention to detail. I hesitated for a long time, staring at my computer screen. Then I copied the link. I pasted it into an email. Subject: "Thought you might like to see this. Hi Mom and Dad. Hope you are well. This came out today. Just wanted to share. Best Gianna." I hit send. I had tracking software on my email. It was a professional hazard. I like to know when people open my subpoenas. I watched the notification pop up. Opened by Marianne Armstrong. 7:14 p.m. I waited. I told myself I was not waiting, but I was. I checked my phone every 5 minutes. Maybe a good job. Maybe even just a thanks for sharing. An hour passed. Then a day. Then a week. They never replied. I checked the logs again. She had opened it. She had clicked the link. She had read it. And then she had closed it and gone back to her life. That was the moment the last little string connecting me to them finally snapped. It was not anger anymore. It was clarity. They did not ignore me because they were busy. They ignored me because my success did not serve them. If I was successful, then their narrative that I was useless was a lie. And Marianne Armstrong did not tolerate challenges to her narrative. I stopped sending emails after that. I focused entirely on Vesperline. I worked 80 hours a week. I bought a condo with a view of the Space Needle. I bought a car that did not rattle when I turned the ignition. I built a life that was entirely 100% mine. Then came last Tuesday. It was raining. A heavy gray sheet of water hammering against the glass walls of our conference room. We were wrapping up a quarterly review. The mood was light. We had just closed a massive case involving insurance fraud in the shipping industry. Sarah walked in holding a thick manila folder. She looked serious. Sarah always looked serious, but this was different. This was the look she wore when something was messy. "Gianna," she said, "I need you to take a look at this. I am booked solid." "Sarah," I said, not looking up from my laptop. "I have the deposition on Thursday and the audit for the tech merger next week. This is a priority," she said. She slid the file across the mahogany table. It stopped inches from my hand. It came in through the anonymous whistleblower tip line, but the documentation attached is significant. Bank statements. Internal emails. It looks like a classic skimming operation, but the structure is sophisticated. I sighed and picked up the file. "What is the entity?" "A charitable foundation," Sarah said. They focus on community development, scholarships, food banks, that sort of thing. The whistleblower claims the director is funneling donations into personal expenses and covering it up with fake vendor invoices. I flipped open the cover. The first page was a summary sheet. My eyes scanned the data automatically. Entity name: The Cedar Hollow Hope Gala Foundation. Registered agent: Marian Armstrong. Location: Cedar Hollow, Tennessee. The air left my lungs. The noise of the rain faded into a dull buzz. I stared at the name. The letters seemed to vibrate on the page. Cedar Hollow. My mother's foundation. The one she had built her entire identity around. The one she had accused me of trying to sabotage when I was 16. Gonna? Sarah asked. You know it. I swallowed. My mouth felt dry. I looked at the address line. It was my childhood home. I know it, I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. Conflict of interest? Sarah asked sharply. She was already reaching to take the file back. If you know them, you can't touch it. I will assign it to Miller. My hand clamped down on the folder. I pressed my fingers against the paper hard enough to wrinkle it. If Miller took this, he would treat it like any other case. He would send a formal inquiry. He would give them time to shred documents. He would let them spin a story. My mother was good at stories. She would charm him. She would play the victim. She might even get away with it. But if I took it... I looked at the date on the whistleblower report. It was dated 3 days ago. No, I said. I looked up at Sarah. No conflict. I can be objective. Technically. It was a lie. I could not be objective. I was about to be surgical. Are you sure? Sarah pressed. You look pale. I am fine, I said. I know the area. It will help with the investigation. I know who the real vendors are and who the fakes are. Sarah studied me for a long moment. She was a good investigator, too. She knew I was holding something back. But she also knew I was the best closer she had. Okay, she said. It is yours. But Gianna, this looks ugly. The amounts are not huge per transaction. But they go back 10 years. We are talking about $500,000. Cumulative. Whoever is running this is either very stupid or very arrogant. Arrogant, I said. Definitely arrogant. I took the file back to my office. I closed the door. I sat there for a long time just staring at the cover. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Grant. Hey G. Long time. Mom is throwing a big engagement dinner for me and Tessa next weekend. She actually said you should come. I know it is last minute, but it would mean a lot to me. Tessa wants to meet the whole family. Think you can make it? I looked at the text. Then I looked at the file. The universe did not usually align with this kind of precision. This was not a coincidence. This was an invitation. I typed back. I will be there. I did not go back to Cedar Hollow to reunite with my family. I did not go back to make peace. I packed my bag and I packed the file because I needed to verify one last thing. I needed to see the physical ledger. I needed to see the fear in her eyes when she realized that the nobody she had laughed at was the only person who knew exactly what she was worth. And now sitting at this dining table, watching Tessa put the pieces together, I knew the time for research was over. The audit was about to begin. The phone call from Grant had come 2 weeks before the dinner, and it was a masterclass in brotherly obligation. His voice had that specific hollow cheerfulness he always used when he was acting as a buffer between me and our mother. He told me he was getting married. He told me he was happy. And then he dropped the condition. Tessa, his fiancée, was insistent on meeting the entire family. She came from a tight-knit clan in Oregon where nobody was left behind. And she found the concept of an Arung sister to be a problem that simply needed a good meal to fix. Grant did not want me there because he missed me. He wanted me there because he did not want to explain my absence to the woman he was trying to impress. I held the phone to my ear in my Seattle office, looking out at the rain streaking the glass. My initial instinct was to decline. I had a life here. I had peace. But then my eyes drifted to the open file on my desk. The Cedar Hollow Hope Gala. The irregularities. The whistleblower report that suggested the rot in that foundation went deep into the bedrock. I told Grant I would come. I told him I would be happy to celebrate them. It was the first lie of my investigation. I was not going back as a sister. I was going back as an auditor conducting a site visit. Driving the rental car into Cedar Hollow felt like driving into a memory that had been scrubbed clean with bleach. The streets were exactly as I remembered. Only greener, cleaner, and wealthier. The oak trees lining the main avenue were wrapped in twinkling fairy lights. Even though it was not Christmas, it was just the aesthetic of the town. Perpetual expensive celebration. I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home at 4 in the afternoon. The house loomed over me. It was a sprawling colonial revival with white pillars that looked like they belonged on a bank, not a residence. The lawn was manicured to within a millimeter of its life. There was not a single weed, not a single brown patch. It was perfect. It was the kind of perfection that required constant, ruthless maintenance. My mother opened the door before I could even knock. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and pearls. Her hair coiffed into a helmet of blonde defiance. "Gonna," she said. She did not hug me. She stepped back and gestured for me to enter, scanning my outfit. A simple blazer and jeans with a critical eye. "You made it. I was telling your father just 10 minutes ago that you would probably miss your flight. You were always so scattered with time management." "Hello, Mother," I said, stepping into the foyer. My flight was on time. The traffic was light. "Well," she said, closing the heavy door behind me. "Miracles do happen." The house smelled of beeswax and expensive leaves. It was exactly the same, yet entirely different. When I lived here, the house felt like a museum, where I was the clumsy patron likely to break something. Now, walking through the hallway, I looked at the furniture and saw price tags. I saw assets. I saw the physical manifestation of income streams that I was currently tracking through a spreadsheet. We walked into the living room. Grant and my father were standing by the fireplace holding tumblers of scotch. But my eyes were drawn immediately to the woman standing next to Grant. Tessa Wynne was striking. She was not the soft, pliable girl I expected Grant to end up with. She had sharp eyes and a posture that suggested she spent a lot of time in boardrooms. She wore a navy dress that was professional but stylish. When she saw me, she stepped forward, immediately extending a hand. "You must be Gianna," she said. Her grip was firm. "I'm so glad you came. Grant talks about you well. He mentions you. I wanted to put a face to the name. It is nice to meet you, Tessa," I said. "Congratulations on the engagement." "Thank you," she smiled. But her eyes were scanning me. She was assessing me. I recognized the look because I used it every day. She was trying to figure out why the sister of her golden boy fiancé looked like she was walking through a minefield. Come. My mother interrupted, clapping her hands. "Let's not stand around in the foyer like strangers. Drinks are in the sunroom. And Gianna, try not to slouch. It makes you look defeated." I straightened my spine. Not for her, but for the battle to come. As we moved toward the sunroom, we passed a large display cabinet in the hallway. Usually, this cabinet held my mother's collection of porcelain figurines. But today the center shelf had been cleared to make room for a framed poster. It was sleek, professionally designed, featuring gold typography on a black background. The 15th Annual Cedar Hollow Hope Gala. Chairperson Marianne Armstrong. I stopped. I could not help it. It was the entity from the Vesperline file. Seeing it here, framed like a diploma or a Medal of Honor, sent a chill down my spine. My mother noticed me looking. She stopped and beamed, placing a hand on the glass. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said, her voice dripping with self-satisfaction. "We raised over $200,000 last year. The entire town is talking about it. The mayor said that without my leadership, the community center would have closed its doors." 200,000. I repeated. My voice was neutral. "That is a lot of money." "It is a fortune," she corrected. "And every penny of it managed by me. You know, people do not understand the burden of leadership. They see the party, the dresses, the champagne. They do not see the hours I spend agonizing over the budget, making sure everything is perfect." I looked at her. I really looked at her. I remembered the ledger on the dining table when I was 16. I remembered the checks written to cash. I wondered if she even remembered that night or if she had rewritten that history, too. "It must be a lot of paperwork," I said. "Endless." She sighed dramatically. "But someone has to do it. Grant is too busy with his career and your father. Well, you know your father. He does not have the head for details." My father took a long sip of his drink and looked out the window. "I actually know a bit about the Hope Gala," Tessa said suddenly. The room went quiet. My mother turned to her, the smile fixed on her face, but her eyes narrowing slightly. "Oh, you do?" Tessa nodded. She took a sip of her water. "I work in legal compliance for regional nonprofits. We handle a lot of oversight for community grants in the Nashville area. The Hope Gala came up in a briefing a few months ago." My heart slammed against my ribs. I kept my face completely still. "A briefing?" My mother laughed, but the sound was brittle. "That sounds very serious. What on earth for?" "Nothing bad," Tessa said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Just some chatter about vendor overlaps. It is pretty common when organizations grow this fast. Sometimes the accounting gets creative. Accidentally, of course." It was a warning shot. I knew it. Tessa knew it. The only person who did not seem to realize the danger was Grant, who was busy checking his watch. "Mom works harder than anyone," Grant said loyally. "She is a saint in this town. If there are accounting errors, it is probably because she is trying to do the job of 10 people. "Exactly," my mother said, smoothing her skirt. She turned her back on the poster. "People love to talk. Jealousy is a terrible disease in the suburbs. Tessa, you will learn that soon enough. Now, shall we sit?" I followed them into the sunroom, my mind racing. Tessa was suspicious. She had heard rumors. That meant the cracks in my mother's operation were visible from the outside. But rumors were not evidence. Rumors did not stand up in court. I needed the smoking gun. The sunroom was bright and airy, filled with white wicker furniture. My mother bustled around playing the perfect hostess, moving a stack of papers off the coffee table to make room for the appetizer tray. She was carrying a leather tote bag, the kind she used for her official business. "Just let me move this," she said, swinging the heavy bag off her shoulder. "I was running errands right up until you arrived. The caterer for the wedding is being difficult about the deposit." She set the bag down on a side chair, but she did it carelessly. The bag tipped over. A cascade of items spilled out onto the Persian rug. Lipstick, a heavily annotated planner, a roll of mints, and a stack of envelopes. My mother made a noise of annoyance and bent down to scoop them up. "Oh, for heaven's sake. Grant, help me." Grant leaned down. I stayed seated, but my eyes were locked on the floor. One envelope had slid further than the others. It had landed right near the leg of my chair. It was a window envelope, the kind used for invoices. The return address was visible through the plastic window. Prestige Logistics Event Support. P.O. Box 492. Brentwood. Tint. My breath hitched. Prestige Logistics. That was the name. That was the shell company Vesper Lane had flagged. It was the company that had billed $40,000 for event consultation for a gala that had ostensibly been planned by volunteers. It was the company that had no website, no physical office, and whose registered owner was a man who had died 3 years ago. I watched my mother's hand reach out. Her manicured fingers snatched the envelope from the rug. She did not look at it. She just shoved it back into the bag along with the lipstick and the mints. There, she said, standing up and brushing off her knees. Crisis averted. She looked at me and smiled. You are being very quiet, Gianna. I hope you are not going to be sullen all evening. We are here to celebrate Grant and Tessa. I'm not sullen, I said. I forced the corners of my mouth up. I am just observing. Well, stop observing and start participating, she said. Dinner is in 10 minutes. I need to check the roast. She walked out of the room, the bag swinging from her shoulder, the bag that contained the physical proof of wire fraud. I looked at Tessa. She was looking at the bag, too. Then she looked at me. For a split second, our eyes met. It was a moment of recognition. She knew something was in that bag. I knew exactly what was in that bag. Grant clapped his hands together. So, who wants another drink before we eat? I'm fine, I said. My voice was calm, but my blood was singing. I did not need a drink. I had seen the target. The prey had just walked back into the cave, and she had brought the evidence with her. I will help your mother, Tessa said, standing up. No, I said. I stood up too. I will go. I haven't had a moment with her yet. Tessa paused. She looked at me with a new curiosity. Okay, go ahead. I walked toward the kitchen, my footsteps silent on the hardwood floor. I was not going to help her with the roast. I was going to see where she put that bag. The dinner was about to start, and I knew exactly how it was going to end. The transition to the dining room was a choreographed migration. My mother led the way, carrying the platter of roast beef like it was a holy relic, while the rest of us trailed behind in the order of importance she had established decades ago. Grant. Then my father. Then Tessa. And finally me. We took our seats. The table was a battlefield of fine china and heavy silverware. I sat across from Grant and Tessa. My mother sat at the head of the table. Naturally, with my father at the opposite end, a distance of 8 feet that felt more like 800 m. For the first 20 minutes, the dinner was aggressively pleasant. It was the kind of pleasantness that made your teeth ache. My mother orchestrated the conversation with the same iron grip she used on the Cedar Hollow social scene. She did not ask questions. She issued prompts. Grant. Tell your father about the promotion, she commanded, spooning glazed carrots onto her plate. Grant obliged, launching into a story about a Q3 sales target that he had crushed. He spoke with his hands, animated and charming. It came down to the wire, he said, laughing. But we closed the deal with the distributors in Memphis at 4 in the afternoon on Friday. The commission check is going to cover the down payment on the new house. Wonderful. My mother beamed. She looked at Tessa. You must be so relieved, dear. A man who can provide is a rare thing these days. You are marrying into stability. Tessa smiled. But it was tight. Grant works hard, she said. But we are splitting the down payment. I think it is important to be equal partners. My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. Gone in a microsecond, replaced by a patronizing indulgence. Thor, dear. Modern and independent. Very trendy. She turned to the side, effectively dismissing Tessa's career as a cute hobby. And the wedding venue. I spoke to the manager at the country club yesterday. I told him the lighting in the ballroom was insufficient. He is going to install new fixtures just for us. You didn't have to do that, Mom, Grant said, though he looked pleased. Nonsense. She waved her knife. The Armstrong name means something in this town. If we are hosting an event, it must be flawless. People expect a certain standard. I ate my roast beef in silence. It was dry. My mother always overcooked the meat because she was terrified of impurities. I cut a piece of potato and watched them. It was fascinating in a clinical sort of way. I was watching a feedback loop. My mother projected an image of perfection. Grant reflected it back to her, and my father absorbed the excess tension so the glass wouldn't shatter. I was the only variable that didn't fit the equation. I saw Tessa glance at me. She had hardly touched her food. She was looking at me with that same intense curiosity she had shown in the living room. She was trying to reconcile the woman sitting before her. Quiet. Compose. Wearing a blazer that cost more than Grant's suit with the story she had been told. So, Tessa said, cutting through my mother's monologue about floral arrangements. Jana. The name landed on the table with a heavy thud. My mother stopped chewing. Grant shifted in his seat. My father reached for his wine glass. Yes, I asked, placing my silverware down gently. We have been talking about Grant's job and the wedding for half an hour. Tessa said, her voice was level professional. I want to hear about you. Grant said. You are in Seattle. That is a vibrant city. What is your life like up there? I opened my mouth to speak, to tell her about the rain, the coffee, the satisfying click of a puzzle piece falling into place when I solved a case. But my mother beat me to it. Oh, Tessa. Do not put her on the spot, my mother said, laughing lightly. It was a sound like breaking glass. Gianna's life is very quiet. She likes it that way. Tessa did not look at my mother. She kept her eyes locked on mine. I am sure it is interesting. You are in finance, right? Grant mentioned something about receipts. She does paperwork. My mother interrupted again, her voice gaining a harder edge. Administrative things. Filing. Data entry. You know, support staff work. It is not exactly dinner table conversation. I watched my brother. This was the moment. This was the moment a brother would say, actually, Mom, she is a senior forensic investigator. Grant looked at me. He saw the stillness in my face. He looked at his mother. He saw the warning in hers. He let out a nervous chuckle. Yeah. She is the organized one. She keeps the lights on for the office, right? Making sure the E are dotted and the T's are crossed. He diminished me. He did it to keep the peace. He did it because it was easier to throw me under the bus than to ask our mother to stop driving it. I actually work in risk assessment, I said. My voice was calm, contrasting sharply with the tension radiating from everyone else. I analyze patterns. Patterns? My mother scoffed. She tries to make it sound so mysterious. It is bookkeeping. Gianna. There is no shame in it. Someone has to type the numbers into the computer. She looked at Tessa with a conspiratorial wink. Gianna has always been a bit grand in her imagination. When she was little, she told people she was going to be a judge. Can you imagine? I think that sounds ambitious, Tessa said coldly. It is delusion. My mother corrected. But we love her anyway. We just have to manage expectations. Gianna is very sensitive. She tends to think everyone is criticizing her when we are just trying to help. My father cleared his throat. It was a rusty and used sound. The Mariners are doing well this year, aren't they? Gianna in Seattle. It was such a pathetic attempt to change the subject that I almost felt sorry for him. He was trying to throw a blanket over a grenade. I do not follow baseball. Dad, I said softly. Of course she doesn't, my mother said. She doesn't have time for hobbies. She is too busy brooding. Honestly. Tessa. You have to be careful with her. One wrong word and she shuts down for a week. It is exhausting. She took a sip of her wine, her eyes gleaming over the rim of the glass. She was enjoying this. She was dissecting me in front of the new audience member, establishing her dominance. She wanted Tessa to know exactly where I stood in the hierarchy so that Tessa would know where she stood. But she had miscalculated. She thought Tessa was an audience member. She didn't realize Tessa was a witness. Tessa was staring at me. She wasn't looking at me with pity. She wasn't looking at me with the awkward embarrassment that most guests felt when my mother started her routine. She was looking at me like I was a riddle she had almost solved. She looked at my hands, which were resting calmly on the table, not fidgeting. She looked at my clothes, tailored and precise. She looked at my eyes, which were not teary or angry, but cold and analytical. This was not the profile of a sensitive, failing administrative assistant. This was the profile of a professional who was currently enduring a hostile interrogation. Tessa's hand moved. I saw it happen in slow motion. She reached into her purse, which was hanging on the back of her chair. She pulled out her phone. She did not bring it up to the table. She kept it in her lap below the edge of the linen tablecloth. So, my mother continued, oblivious. For the rehearsal dinner, I was thinking we could do a seafood tower. Grant loves shrimp. The table chatter resumed, a drone of white noise. Grant nodded enthusiastically about the shrimp. My father asked about the cocktail sauce. But under the table, the light from the screen flared. The room was dimly lit. The chandelier cast a warm yellow glow. But the light reflecting up onto Tessa's face was cool, blue-white. It illuminated the underside of her chin and caught the sharp angle of her cheekbone. Iwatiteas. They darted left to right. She was typing. Gianarmstron. Seattle. I took a sip of water. I waited. I knew exactly what the algorithm would serve her. It would not be a LinkedIn profile for a secretary. The first result would be the Vesperline Integrity Bureau official team page. The second result would be the Seattle Times article audit reveals millions in misappropriated funds. The third result would be the public transcript of the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing. Tessa's eyes stopped moving. She froze. Her fork was hovering over her plate. Forgotten. Her head tilted down slightly. Her neck rigid. I saw her swipe a finger up the screen. Scrolling. Reading. Her lips parted slightly. A tiny sharp intake of breath hissed through her teeth. It was quiet enough that Grant didn't hear it over his own description of tiger prawns, but I heard it. It was the sound of a paradigm shifting. She swiped again and again. She was reading the summary of my credentials. Certified fraud examiner. Forensic accountant. Specialization corporate embezzlement. And nonprofit. Misconduct. And then the kicker. The title that my firm insisted on using for senior partners who led high-profile investigations. Tessa's eyes widened. She slowly lifted her head. The blue light from the phone was still reflecting in her pupils, making them look electric. She looked at my mother, who was currently complaining about the price of lemons. Then she looked at Grant, who was nodding like a bobblehead. Finally, she looked at me. There was no confusion left in her face. There was only the stunned realization that she was sitting at a table with a predator, and the only person equipped to hunt it. She looked back down at her lap one last time, reading a specific line of text. I knew which one it was. It was the line under my bio that listed my current active areas of inquiry. She whispered 3 words. They were barely audible, spoken more to herself than to the room. But in the sudden lull of conversation, they landed like stones in a still pond. Senior investigator. She breathed. Nonprofit fraud. My mother paused. What was that? Dear, did you say something? Tessa looked up. Her expression had changed. The politeness was gone. The difference was gone. In its place was the cold, hard look of a woman who had just realized she was about to marry into a crime scene. I said. Tessa spoke up, her voice trembling slightly with adrenaline. Senior investigator. She brought the phone up from her lap. She placed it on the table face up right next to the crystal butter dish. The screen was bright, displaying my professional headshot, stern, capable, and very much not a receptionist. Mrs. Armstrong, Tessa said. And this time there was no warmth in the title. You said Gianna files papers. My mother said, looking at the phone with a frown of confusion. What is this? This, Tessa said, tapping the screen with a manicured fingernail. Says she is one of the top forensic accountants on the West Coast. And it says she specializes in catching people who steal from charities. The silence that followed was absolute. It was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum just before the explosion. My mother looked at the phone. Then she looked at me. For the first time all night. Perhaps for the first time in my life. She did not look at me with dismissal. She looked at me with fear. The silence that hung over the dining table was not the polite lull of people enjoying a meal. It was the heavy pressurized silence of a submarine hull creaking before it implodes. The air conditioner hummed in the background. A low drone that seemed to vibrate against the crystal wine glasses. But nobody moved. Tessa did not look at my mother. She did not look at Grant. She kept her eyes locked on me. Her expression a mixture of confusion and a rapidly dawning, terrifying clarity. She took a breath. And when she spoke, her voice was stripped of all the social niceties she had been performing since she walked through the door. Gianna, she said. And the way she said my name was different now. It had weight. Do you work for Vesperline Integrity Bureau? I placed my hands flat on the table, feeling the cool linen under my palms. I did not look at my mother. I looked straight at Tessa. Yet, I said, I have been with them for 7 years. Vesperine? Grant asked. He blinked, his fork hovering halfway to his mouth, a piece of roast beef impaled on the tines. He looked between us like a spectator at a tennis match who had lost track of the ball. What is Vesperline? It sounds like a pharmaceutical drug. My mother let out a sharp, derisive snort. She picked up her wine glass, swirling the red liquid violently. Oh, Grant. Honestly, it is probably one of those multi-level marketing schemes, you know, where they sell essential oils or leggings and call themselves CEOs on Facebook. Gianna always did have a penchant for alternative career paths. She looked at me with a pitying smile. The kind you give a child who has drawn on the walls. Is that it? Gianna? Are you selling vitamins now? Is that why you are so secretive? You do not want us to know you are struggling to move inventory. It is not a pyramid scheme, Tessa said. Her voice was sharp, cutting through my mother's condescension like a scalpel. Tessa reached out and grabbed her phone from the table. She did not ask for permission. She turned the device around, holding it up so that the screen faced Grant and my parents. The brightness was turned up to 100%. Look at this, Tessa commanded. Grant leaned in, squinting slightly. My father, who had been staring at his plate as if wishing he could dissolve into the mashed potatoes, slowly lifted his head. Even my mother, driven by an inability to ignore a spotlight, glanced over. The screen displayed a professional headshot. In the photo, I was wearing a charcoal suit, standing in front of the federal courthouse in Seattle. My expression in the picture was unsmiling, severe, and utterly competent. Below it, the text was clear even from a distance. Gunna Armstrong, Senior Lead Investigator, Financial Crimes Division. That is Gianna, Grant whispered. He sounded like he was identifying a body. But the hair is different. Read the bio. Grant, Tessa said, her finger tapping the glass. Read the second paragraph. Grant read it out loud, his voice halting. Armstrong has served as the lead forensic auditor in over 40 high-profile cases involving corporate embezzlement, tax fraud, and misappropriation of charitable assets. She was the primary expert witness in State of Washington versus Bayside Relief, resulting in the recovery of $12 million in stolen funds. Grant stopped reading. He looked up at me. His mouth was slightly open. For 36 years, he had looked at me and seen a shadow. He had seen the little sister who needed to be protected or ignored or managed. Now he was looking at a stranger. He was realizing that while he was busy being the star of the family, I had been out in the world becoming a weapon. $12 million? Grant asked, his voice cracking. You recovered $12 million. It was actually $12.4 million. I corrected gently. But the papers rounded down. My father made a sound. It was a soft exhale. Almost a whistle. He looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time in decades, there was no disappointment in his eyes now. There was shock. Yes. But underneath it, there was a flicker of something else. Fear. It was hard to tell. He looked like a man who had just realized the quiet cat sleeping in the corner was actually a panther. This is ridiculous. My mother snapped. She slammed her wine glass down. Wine sloshed over the rim, staining the white tablecloth with a blood-red blotch. Anyone can write things on the internet. I could go online right now and say, I am the Queen of England. Does not make it true. It is just puffery. She is trying to make herself look important to impress you. Tessa. She turned her glare on me, her eyes hard and cold. Gianna. Stop this charade. Tell them the truth. Tell them you file invoices for a temp agency. This is embarrassing. It is not a charade, Marian. Tessa said. She did not call her Miss Strong this time. The honorific had vanished. Tessa withdrew the phone and began scrolling again. Her thumb moved with aggressive speed. This isn't a blog post. This is a citation from the Congressional Record. This is a link to the Department of Justice database. She looked up at my mother, her eyes narrowing. You cannot fake a federal subpoena list. My mother waved her hand dismissively, but I saw the tremor in her fingers. She hid her hand under the table. I do not know what you are looking at, but I know my daughter. She does not have the head for numbers. She failed algebra in the 9th grade. I got an A in algebra, I said quietly. You told me I failed because you threw away the report card before Dad could see it. Lies, my mother hissed. Pathological lies. This is what she does. Grant. She rewrites history to make herself the victim. Tessa ignored the outburst. She was deep in the data now. She was not just looking at my profile anymore. She was looking at the cross-references. Vesper line system was integrated with public records and recent inquiries were often tagged for conflict of interest transparency. Wait, Tessa said. The word hung in the air. Sharp and dangerous. She scrolled down to the bottom of the page to a section labeled Active Inquiries and Related Entities. She looked at the screen. Then she looked at the framed poster in the hallway. Then she looked back at the screen. Why is Cedar Hollow on this list? Tessa asked. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. What? Grant asked, leaning closer to Tessa. Right here, Tessa pointed. Under reference cases, it lists Cedar Hollow Hope Gala and Foundation. It is tagged as an active preliminary review. She turned the phone toward my mother again. Why is Gianna's firm investigating your charity? My mother froze. It was a microscopic reaction. If you were not looking for it, you would have missed it. It was a momentary suspension of breath. The muscles around her eyes tightened and her pupil dilated just a fraction. It was the biological response to a sudden acute threat. It was the look of a deer hearing the twig snap before the bullet flies. I saw it. Caught it. And she knew I saw it. Her eyes flicked to mine. For a second, The mask of the suburban matriarch slipped completely. Beneath it was pure, unadulterated panic. She realized in that split second that I was not here for dinner. She realized I was not here to be the prop. She realized I was the hunter. Then the mask slammed back into place. "Oh, for heaven's sake," my mother scoffed, forcing a laugh that sounded like grinding gears. "They probably just have us on a mailing list. We are a prominent organization. We get solicited by auditors and financial firms all the time. They want our business because we manage significant assets." "Vesperline does not solicit business," I said. My voice was calm, steady. The voice I used when I was sitting across from a CEO who was trying to explain away a missing pension fund. "We are retained only when there is credible evidence of financial malfeasance." Malfeasance? Grant repeated the word, tasting it. "That means wrongdoing, right?" "Means fraud, Grant," Tessa said. She did not take her eyes off my mother. "This is an insult." My mother stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. "I will not be interrogated at my own dinner table by my son's fiancée and my liar of a daughter. I have dedicated 20 years to this community. I have built that gala from nothing. I have fed thousands of families. Sit down." "Marianne," my father said. It was spoken softly, but it was the first time in my life I had heard him give her a direct order. My mother looked at him shocked. "Excuse me," I said. "Sit down," my father repeated. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the phone on the table. "Let Tessa finish." My mother slowly sank back into her chair. Her face was pale beneath her makeup. She gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned yellow. Tessa looked at the phone again. She tapped on the specific entry for the gala. She read the subheader. "Flagged for vendor irregularities. Shell company invoices. Commingling of funds." Tessa looked up. She was a lawyer. She knew what those terms meant. She knew that commingling was the polite legal term for using charity money to pay for your personal credit card bills. She looked at the lavish room around us, the crystal chandelier, the silk curtains, the expensive roast beef, and then she looked at the woman who claimed to be a volunteer. Tessa's voice was very quiet now. It was the voice of someone who is afraid of the answer she's about to receive. "Mrs. Marianne," Tessa asked. "You are the treasurer for the foundation, right? You handle the accounts. I oversee them." My mother said tightly, "I have a bookkeeper." "But you sign the checks," Tessa pressed. "You have the final approval on all disbursements. I am the chairperson." My mother spat. "Thor's. I sign the checks. Someone has to take responsibility." Tessa nodded slowly. She picked up her wine glass, but she did not drink. She just held it as if she needed something to anchor her to reality. And Tessa continued, her eyes drilling into my mother. "Do you also verify the vendor? Specifically, a vendor named Prestige Logistics." My mother stopped breathing. The name of the company from the envelope in her bag. The envelope she had dropped on the floor 20 minutes ago. The envelope she thought nobody had noticed. "I use many vendors," my mother stammered. "I cannot recall every single one." "That is ridiculous. Gianna remembers," Tessa said. She turned to me. "Gianna, does Vesperline have a file on Prestige Logistics?" I looked at my mother. I saw the terror behind her eyes. I saw the plea. "Don't do this. Don't ruin this." But I also saw 18 years of obity. I saw the math competition certificate in the trash. I saw the empty email inbox. "Yet," I said clearly. "We do." "And what do they do?" Tessa asked. "Nothing," I said. "They don't exist. It is a shell company used to launder money out of non-profit accounts." Grant made a choking sound. My father closed his eyes. Tessa leaned forward. Her next question was not an inquiry. It was an indictment. "Mrs. Marianne? Tessa asked, her voice cold as ice water. If I were to pull the incorporation papers for Prestige Logistics right now, whose signature would I find on the bank account opening documents? For a split second, I thought my mother might actually flip the table. Her hands were gripping the mahogany edge so tightly that the tendons stood out like steel cables under her aging skin. But Marian Armstrong was a creature of control, and flipping a table was something people in trailer parks did. Not the chairwoman of the Cedar Hollow Hope Gala. Instead of exploding, she imploded. She pulled herself inward, her posture stiffening into a rigid vertical line of indignation. She did not look at the phone Tessa was holding. She looked at Tessa herself, and her expression transformed from panic into a sneering, disappointed judgment. "This is incredibly rude," my mother said. Her voice was not loud, but it was trembling with a controlled frequency that hurt the ears. "You come into my home, eat my food, drink my wine, and then you pull out your little screen and start accusing me of federal crimes. I thought you were raised better than this, Tessa. I thought you had class." "It is not about class, Marianne," Tessa replied, her voice steady, but her hands shaking slightly as she held the phone. "It is about the law, and it is about where the money for this wedding is coming from. The money is none of your business," my mother snapped. She turned her head violently toward Grant. "Grant, are you going to let her speak to your mother this way? Are you going to sit there like a statue while your fiancé calls me a thief?" Grant looked like he was having an out-of-body experience. He looked from Tessa, who was holding the truth in her hands, to our mother, who was demanding his blind loyalty. For 38 years, Grant had been the peacekeeper. He was the one who smoothed things over, the one who laughed off Mom's quirks, the one who told me to just apologize so we could eat dinner in peace. "Mom," Grant started, his voice weak. "She is just asking a question. If everything is above board, just explain it. Who is Prestige Logistics?" "I don't have to explain myself to my children," she cried out, her voice rising an octave. She stood up, knocking her chair back against the buffet table. "I have sacrificed everything for this family. Every nice thing you own. Grant came from my hard work. And now you let her," she pointed a shaking finger at me, "poison your mind. Look at her. She is sitting there gloating." I was not gloating. I was sitting perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap. I was watching a master manipulator work a room she had lost control of. "Gianna did this," my mother continued, her eyes wild. "She came back here on purpose. She knew this was your engagement dinner, Grant. She knew it was a special night and she couldn't stand it. She never could stand it when you were the center of attention. She dragged this drama in here to ruin your happiness. She's jealous, Grant. She is a sad, lonely woman who wants to drag us all down into her misery." "I am not lonely," I said. My voice was quiet, cutting under her shouting. "And I am not jealous. I am working." "Working?" She laughed. A harsh barking sound. "You call this work sabotaging your brother's future. You are a cancer in this family, Gianna. You always have been. You infect everything you touch. Marianne." "Stop," my father said. We all turned to him. My father was clutching his napkin like a lifeline. His face was gray. He looked at my mother with a mixture of exhaustion and horror. "Don't you speak to her that way," my father said. It was a weak command spoken with the energy of a man who had been beaten down for 4 decades. But it was there. "She is our daughter. She is an auditor." My mother screamed at him. "She is the enemy. Darren, are you too stupid to see that she is not here to visit? She is here to audit us. I am here to find the truth," I said. I looked at Grant. "Grant, listen to me. This isn't about me ruining your party. This is about the fact that the down payment for your house likely came from a vendor kickback scheme. If you accept that money, you become an accessory to wire fraud. Grant's face went white. He looked at Tessa. Is that true? Tessa didn't answer him directly. She was typing on her phone again. She was not engaging in the emotional theater my mother was directing. She was a lawyer. She was looking for the paper trail. Prestige Logistics. Tessa murmured, her eyes scanning a page. Here it is. It is not just in Vesperline's database, Marianne. It is in the local news. My mother froze. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like a curtain dropping. What he? The Nashville Gazette. Tessa read. Her voice clear and precise. Small claims court docket from 3 months ago. A local tent rental company sued Prestige Logistics for non-payment of subcontracted services. Tessa looked up, holding the phone out like a weapon. The article says the tent company was hired by Prestige to set up for the Cedar Hollow Hope Gala. Prestige billed the foundation $40,000 for the tents, but they only paid the actual tent company $4,000 and then the check bounced. That is a lie. My mother whispered. That is fake news. There is a case number. Tessa said relentlessly. CV 4920. And here's the interesting part. The judge dismissed the case because they couldn't serve the papers. Prestige Logistics has no physical address. The process server noted that the registered business address is a UPS store box in Brentwood. Tessa paused, letting the information land. But the process server noted something else. Tessa continued. He noted that the contact number listed for Prestige Logistics on the contract went to a voicemail box. She looked straight at my mother. A voicemail box that identified the owner as M. Armstrong. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a guillotine blade hanging at the top of its arc. Grant put his head in his hands. Mom? He groaned. Please tell me that isn't your number. My mother did not answer. She looked trapped. She looked at the door as if calculating whether she could run for it. But she was Marian Armstrong. She didn't run. She doubled down. It was a mistake, she said, her voice trembling. It was an administrative error. I was helping the vendor set up their voicemail. I am very hands-on. You know that, Grant. I do everything for everyone. I probably just put my number down as a backup contact because they are so unreliable. For a company that doesn't exist. I asked. They exist? She insisted. Her eyes frantic. They are just small. They are a startup. I was trying to help a small business. Is that a crime trying to help people? It is a crime when you own the company. Mom, I said. I do not own it. She shrieked. You are twisting everything. You are trying to frame me because you hate me. You hate that I am successful. You hate that this town loves me. You are trying to destroy my reputation because you have nothing. You are a nobody. A nothing. She was panting now, her chest heaving. She looked deranged. The veneer of the perfect hostess completely stripped away. I looked at her and I felt nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just the cold, professional detachment of an investigator looking at a subject who had just confessed by trying too hard to deny it. I am not a nobody. Mother, I said calmly. I am the lead investigator assigned to file number 89342. I reached into my bag which was sitting on the floor beside me. I pulled out my tablet. I set it on the table right in the center, pushing aside the untouched bowl of roasted potatoes. I tapped the screen. It woke up instantly. I opened the file I had been building for 3 days. It was not just notes. It was a draft of the formal preliminary review document that I was scheduled to submit to the Vesperline Oversight Committee on Monday morning. The header was bold and black. Confidential Preliminary Fraud Review Subject Cedar Hollow Hope Gala Foundation Status Active Inquiry. I did not come home to eat dinner, I said. My voice steady and clear in the silent room. And I did not come home to ruin a party. I came home because the IRS and the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation are going to be asking these same questions in about 2 weeks, and they won't be as polite as Tessa. I swiped to the next page of the document. It was a flowchart. It showed the money leaving the foundation's donor account going into Prestige Logistics, and then crucially it showed where the money went from there. You can lie to Grant, I said. And you can lie to Dad. You can even lie to yourself. But you cannot lie to the AC transfer protocols. I turned the tablet so everyone could see the graphic. Tessa found the lawsuit, I said. But I found the bank transfers. I pointed to a specific line on the chart. On October 14th of last year, the foundation paid Prestige Logistics $15,000 for lighting consultation. 2 days later, Prestige Logistics transferred $12,000 to a personal account. I looked at my mother. She was shaking her head, mouthing the word no over and over again. And do you know what that personal account was used for? The very next day, I asked. I didn't wait for an answer. I looked at Grant. Grant, I said softly, check the date on your watch. When did you get that new Rolex? The one you said was a gift from Mom for making vice president. Grant looked down at his wrist. The heavy gold watch glinted in the chandelier light. He looked at the watch. Then he looked at the screen. Then he looked at our mother. October 17th. He whispered. Happy anniversary, Grant. I said. You are wearing $12,000 of stolen charity money. My mother let out a sob. It wasn't a cry of remorse. It was the sound of a cornered animal realizing the cage door had just clicked shut. It was a gift. She wailed. I wanted him to have something nice. He deserves it. He works so hard. It wasn't your money to give, Tessa said. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. She was looking at the watch on Grant's wrist with a look of pure revulsion. It is all the same, my mother argued, her logic twisting into knots. I earned that money. I organized the gala. I got the donors. If I took a commission, I deserve it. Do you know how much professional event planners charge? I saved the foundation money by doing it myself. That is not how nonprofits work. Marianne, I said. You cannot pay yourself secret commissions through a fake company. That is embezzlement. That is a felony. And because you use the mail system to send the invoices, it is also mail fraud. And because the transfers cross state lines for some of the vendors, it is wire fraud. I leaned forward. You are looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison. Mother. The words hung there. 10 to 15 years. My father made a sound like he was choking. He stood up, knocking his chair over. He walked to the window and stared out at the dark lawn, his shoulders shaking. Grant looked like he was going to be sick. He started to take the watch off. His hands were shaking so bad he couldn't undo the clasp. He clawed at it, desperate to get the evidence off his body. Take it off, he muttered to himself. Get it off. Get it off. Stop it, my mother screamed at him. Keep it on. It is a gift from your mother. Don't you dare disrespect me. You stole it, Grant shouted back at her. It was the first time he had ever raised his voice to her. You stole it from sick kids and poor families, and you put it on my wrist. I did it for us, she yelled back. For this family? To show people who we are. You showed us exactly who you are, Tessa said. Tessa stood up. She picked up her phone. She looked at me. Gianna, she said. What happens next? Legally? Legally. I said. I have a duty to report. Once I verified the flow of funds, which I just did with the watch confirmation, I am obligated by my license to submit the file. No. My mother lunged forward. She grabbed the edge of the table. You can't. You are my daughter. You cannot turn in your own mother. It is unnatural. It is evil. It is integrity. I said integrity. She spat the word like it was poison. You don't know the meaning of the word. You are just a vindictive little girl trying to get back at me because I didn't put your drawing on the fridge 20 years ago. I am 36 years old, I said. And I don't care about the fridge. I care about the $600,000 that is missing from the foundation's accounts over the last 5 years. My father turned around from the window. 600,000, he whispered. Give or take. I said. I am still reconciling the credit card statements from 2019. My mother slumped back in her chair. She looked small suddenly. The air had gone out of her. The denial wasn't working. The aggression wasn't working. Then she looked at me with a new expression. A look of cunning calculation. You haven't submitted it yet, she said. Her eyes darted to the tablet. Says draft. That is correct, I said. So, we can fix this, she said. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. We can fix this. Gianna. I can put the money back. I have savings. I can sell the jewelry. I can put it all back before Monday. No harm done. Nobody has to know. She reached out a hand across the table. Palm up. A gesture of truce. Please. Gianna, she said. For the family. For your brother's wedding. If you file that report, the wedding is off. The scandal will ruin everything. You don't want to be the reason Grant loses his happiness, do you? I looked at her hand. It was manicured. Soft, uncalloused. It was the hand of a woman who had never faced a consequence she couldn't charm or buy her way out of. I looked at Grant. He was finally getting the watch off. He threw it on the table. It slid across the linen and hit the gravy boat with a loud clink. I looked at Tessa. She was waiting for my answer. I picked up my tablet. I tapped the screen. I can't delete the file. Mother. I said it is cloud synced to the Vesper line servers. Every edit I make is logged. Sarah. My boss already has read-only access. You set me up. She whispered. No, I said. I just turned on the lights. I stood up. But I added, looking down at her. There is one thing. The report is a draft. It doesn't have the final recommendation attached yet. I can recommend a full federal prosecution. I paused. Or, Grant asked. His voice. Or, I said. I can recommend a voluntary self-disclosure and restitution agreement if the subject of the investigation confesses, repays the funds immediately, and steps down from all positions of financial authority. The district attorney sometimes agrees to a suspended sentence or probation. No jail time. Just shame and poverty. My mother looked at me. She weighed the options. Prison or public humiliation for her. I honestly didn't know which was worse. And I added, twisting the knife just a little. You have to admit it to the board. To the donors. To Mrs. Gable next door. You have to tell them all that you are a thief. Can't. She whispered. They look up to me. Then I suggest you pack a bag for federal prison. I said. Because the FBI doesn't care about your social standing. I picked up my bag. I am going back to my hotel. I said. I have to finish the report. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to email me your resignation letter and a certified bank check for the full amount of the watch plus the $40,000 for the tents. If I don't have it, I file the recommendation for maximum prosecution. I looked at Tessa. It was nice meeting you, Tessa. I said. I am sorry about the dinner. Tessa looked at me. A small grim smile touched her lips. Don't be, she said. It was the most educational meal I have ever had. I did not walk out the door. I wanted to. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, to get back to the sanitized safety of my hotel room, where the only thing I had to manage was the thermostat. But I stayed because I saw the look on Grant's face. It was the look of a man watching his life burn down. And for the first time, he wasn't looking at our mother to put out the fire. He was looking at me. "Wait," Grant said. His voice was cracked. Desperate. He stood up, knocking the table with his hip. "Jana. Wait. You said you haven't sent it yet. You said it is a draft." I stopped with my hand on the strap of my bag. I turned back to the table. The wreckage of the dinner lay between us, the cooling roast beef, the spilled wine, the shattered illusion of the Armstrong family legacy. "It is a draft," I admitted, my voice level, but only because I have a standard of evidence that is higher than this family standard of morality. I am missing one final verification. I need to cross-reference the merchant codes on the credit card statement with the bank's back-end data to prove intent. Once I have that, the draft becomes a final report. Intent. My mother whispered. She had slumped in her chair, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. "You talk like a machine. I am your mother. My intent was to survive. Your intent was to defraud." Tessa interrupted. Tessa had not moved since I revealed the truth about the shell company. She was sitting with her hands clasped in front of her, her knuckles white. She looked up at me and then she looked at the tablet still glowing on the table. "I know this pattern," Tessa said softly. I didn't want to believe it when I saw the invoice, but I know it. She looked at Grant, her eyes full of a terrifying calmness. "Before I went into corporate compliance, I did a summer internship with the Fraud Bureau in Chicago. We spent 3 months chasing a guy who ran a veterans charity. He used the exact same structure. He would pay a vendor for a service catering, tent rental, consulting, and then the vendor would issue a credit memo to a different account." Tessa turned to my mother. "It is called invoice cycling. It is clumsy, Marianne. It is the kind of thing people do when they are desperate and they think nobody is watching. But somebody is always watching. Nobody was watching." My mother snapped, her defensive walls trying to rebuild themselves from the rubble. "For 15 years, nobody cared. The donors wrote their checks. They came to the party. They drank the champagne. And they went home feeling good about themselves. I gave them what they wanted. Why does it matter how I move the money around as long as the gala happened?" "Because it is not your money," I said. Grant ran a hand through his hair. He looked sick. "Okay, look, we can fix this. Mom pays it back. We sell the lake house. We sell the cars. We put the money back. Gianna deletes the file. And we move on." He looked at me with pleading eyes. "Right? Gee. You can just hit delete. You said you haven't sent it." I looked at my brother. He was 38 years old and he still believed that if you closed your eyes tight enough, the monsters would go away. "It is not just about the money, Grant," I said. "It is about the liability." I walked back to the table and tapped the screen of my tablet. I swiped to the section of the report titled Governance and Board Oversight. "Do you know who is listed on the state incorporation papers as the secretary of the board for the Cedar Hollow Hope Gala?" I asked. Grant blinked. "No." "Some friend of Mom's." "No." I said, "It is you." Grant froze. "What you?" I repeated. "Grant Armstrong. You have been the registered secretary of the board for 6 years. That is impossible." Grant stammered. "I never went to a meeting. I never signed anything. You sign the annual report every January." My mother cut in. Her voice was dismissive, as if this was a minor detail. "I brought the papers to you. I told you it was just standard filing for the state to keep the nonprofit status active. I told you it would look good on your resume. You signed them right next to your tax returns." Grant stared at her. "You told me those were beneficiary forms for the insurance policy. Well, you should have read them." She shot back. "You are a businessman, Grant. If you sign something without reading it, that is your fault." The cruelty of it took my breath away. She had not only stolen from the community, she had framed her own son as her accomplice. Grant, I said softly, if this goes to federal court, you are not just a bystander. You are a negligent officer of the board. In the eyes of the law, you failed your fiduciary duty. You could be liable for the restitution. They could garnish your wages. They could seize your assets. Grant looked down at his hands. He looked at the Rolex he had thrown on the table. He looked at the house he had bragged about buying. I didn't know. He whispered. I swear to God. I didn't know. Ignorance is not a legal defense when your signature is on the audit documents, Tessa said. Her voice was shaking. Grant. You are legally radioactive. If I marry you, my assets could be exposed to my credit, my career. I did it for you. My mother shouted, slamming her hand on the table. The sudden noise made us all jump. I did it for all of you. You think this life is free? You think this house pays for itself? You think the country club memberships and the private schools and the weddings just fall out of the sky? She stood up, pacing the room like a caged tiger. I wanted us to be someone, she hissed. I wanted you to be respected. When we moved here, we were nobodies. Your father was a mid-level manager. We didn't have the pedigree. I built this. I clawed our way into society. I made sure you, Grant, were invited to the right parties. I made sure you met the right people. And yes, sometimes I had to borrow from the fund to keep up appearances, to buy the right dress, to host the right dinner. But I always meant to put it back. But you never did. I said. You just took more because it was never enough. She screamed at me. It is expensive to be perfect, Gianna. You wouldn't know. You were happy being invisible. You were happy wearing rags and reading your books. But Grant was meant for greatness. I had to support him. So you stole from a children's charity to buy him a watch? I asked. I invested in his image. She corrected. And look at him. He is a vice president. He is marrying a lawyer. It worked. It didn't work, I said. It is a lie. And it is over. It is not over until you send that file, she growled. She looked at me with pure venom. And why would Vesperline even care about a little town like Cedar Hollow? Who told them? Did you tell them? Did you turn in your own mother just to feel powerful? I didn't tell them, I said. I looked at the tablet. This was the twist she didn't see coming. She thought she was fighting me. She didn't realize she was fighting the very people she was trying to impress. Vesperline does not chase rumors, I said. We were hired. We were retained by a private donor who requested a specific forensic audit of the Hope Gala's books. My mother stopped pacing. A donor who we have hundreds of donors. This one gave $10,000 last year, I said. And $5,000 the year before. And when they didn't see their name in the annual program, and when they didn't receive a tax receipt, they got suspicious. I swiped the screen to reveal the engagement letter. It was Mrs. Whitmore, I said. My mother grabbed the back of a chair. Her knees seemed to give out. Sylvia Whitmore, the matriarch of Cedar Hollow. I confirmed the woman whose approval you have spent 20 years trying to earn. She is the one who hired us. Mother. She suspected you were skimming off the top 2 years ago. She just waited until she had enough proof to hire a firm that couldn't be bought. No. My mother whispered. Sylvia is my friend. We play bridge. Sylvia is a shark, I said. And she knows a hustler when she sees one. She didn't just want her money back. She wanted to make sure you never ran a committee in this town again. The devastation on my mother's face was total. Losing the money was one thing. Losing her social standing, being exposed by the very queen bee she worshipped, that was a death sentence. So I said, leaning back against the sideboard. I don't have to send the file for the investigation to happen. Mrs. Whitmore already knows. The only question is whether the police get involved or if you settle quietly and disappear. Tessa stood up. She picked up her purse. I can't do this, she said. She wasn't looking at my mother. She was looking at Grant. Tessa. Wait. Grant pleaded. He reached for her hand, but she pulled back. We can figure this out. I will resign from the board. I will testify. I will do whatever it takes. Grant, Tessa said, her voice trembling. You are 40 years old and you let your mother commit felonies in your name because you like the lifestyle she provided. You aren't a victim. You are a beneficiary. She looked around the room. I walked into this house thinking I was meeting a family, but I am walking into a RICO case. I am a compliance officer. Grant. I can't be associated with this. If this news breaks, and it will break, my license could be reviewed just for knowing about it and not reporting it immediately. Tessa. Please. My mother switched tactics instantly. The rage vanished, replaced by a desperate, cloying manipulation. She reached out her hands. Tessa. Darling. Think about the wedding. Think about the babies. You can't let a little paperwork error destroy love. Don't be cold. Don't be like Gianna. Be the bigger person. Save this family. Save the family. Tessa laughed. A short, bitter sound. You want me to save your reputation? Marian? You don't care about the family. You just want a human shield. Tessa stepped away from the table. She looked at me. Gianna, you are the only sane person in this room. Do what you have to do. I intend to, I said. Tessa turned to leave. But I spoke one last time. I had to. The file had one more data point that needed to be verified, and it was the one that would ensure Tessa never looked back. Tessa, I said, before you go. She stopped at the archway of the dining room. What? I looked down at the tablet. I zoomed in on a transaction from 3 months ago. Grant, I said. When did you buy Tessa's engagement ring? The diamond solitaire? Grant looked up, confused and terrified. March 15th. Why? And how much was it? I asked. Be precise. $18,000, Grant said. I paid for it. I wrote the check myself. You did? I agreed. I see the check from your personal account. But here is the interesting thing. I turned the tablet toward Tessa. On March 14th, one day before Grant wrote that check, the Cedar Hollow Hope Gala transferred exactly $18,000 to Prestige Logistics for audiovisual upgrades. And on the morning of March 15th, Prestige Logistics transferred $18,000 into Grant's personal checking account. I looked at Tessa's left hand. The diamond was sparkling under the chandelier lights. He didn't pay for the ring. Tessa, I said. The cancer survivors did. Tessa looked down at her hand. She looked at the ring as if it had suddenly turned into a burning coal. She let out a small, horrified gasp. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just started to pull. She yanked the ring off her finger. It was tight, and she scratched her skin. But she didn't care. She ripped it off and threw it. It didn't hit the table. It hit Grant. It bounced off his chest and landed on the floor with a dull sound. I am out, Tessa said, and then she walked out the front door, leaving it wide open to the night air. The front door was wide open, letting in the humid, chirping night air of Cedar Hollow. But Tessa did not keep walking. She had stopped on the threshold, her silhouette framed by the porch light, her back to us. She was a statue of fury and disbelief. Inside the dining room, the sound of the ring hitting the floor seemed to echo endlessly. Grant was on his knees. He wasn't looking for the ring. He was looking at the empty space on the floor where his dignity used to be. He looked up at our mother. His face a mask of absolute childlike betrayal. You told me that money was from the savings bonds. Grant stammered. His voice was high and thin, cracking under the weight of the reality I had just dropped on him. You told me Grandma's bonds matured. You said, "Go get the ring." Grant. I transferred the bond money to your account. You specifically said it was family money. It is family money, my mother insisted. She hadn't moved from her chair, but her posture had shifted. She was no longer the imperious queen. She was cornered, hunched, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an exit that didn't involve handcuffs. The foundation is the family. Grant. I built it. It is us. What difference does it make which account it sits in before it pays for your happiness? It makes a difference because it is illegal. Grant shouted. He scrambled to his feet, wiping his hands on his pants as if he could wipe away the stain of the transaction. I bought a diamond with stolen funds. Mom, do you know what that makes me? It makes me a receiver of stolen goods. It makes me a target. He turned to the doorway. Tessa, please. You have to believe me. I didn't know. I thought she was just being generous. Tessa turned around slowly. She didn't step back inside. But she didn't leave. She stood in the frame, her arms crossed over her chest, holding herself together by sheer force of will. Her eyes were dry, but they were burning. She was listening. She was a lawyer building her defense, realizing that her fiancé wasn't a criminal mastermind, just a useful idiot. Marian, a voice croaked from the other end of the table. My father, Darren, was gripping the back of his chair. His knuckles were white. For 30 years, I had watched this man fold himself into small shapes to fit into my mother's world. I had watched him turn up the volume on the television when she yelled. I had watched him walk out to the garden when she criticized me. But tonight, there was nowhere to go. The garden couldn't fix this. Marian, my father said again, louder this time. What have you done? I haven't done anything that everyone else isn't doing. My mother snapped at him, relieved to have a target she knew she could bully. Oh, don't look at me like that. Darren. You like the country club, don't you? You like the new leasing on the Lexus. Where did you think the money came from? Your salary at the hardware store hasn't covered our overhead in 10 years. My father recoiled as if she had slapped him. I thought you were managing the investments. You said you were day trading. She cried. I was trading our liquidity against the foundation's cash flow. It is standard practice. Darren. It is a bridge loan. That is all it is. Temporary allocation of resources. Every major CEO does it. They move capital where it is needed and then they move it back when the quarter closes. That is not a loan. Mother. I cut in. My voice was the only steady thing in the room. A loan has paperwork. A loan has interest terms. A loan has a repayment schedule. What you did is called siphoning. You took the money and you never put it back. You didn't treat the foundation like a business. You treated it like a personal piggy bank. I was going to put it back. She screamed at me. After the wedding. After the gala next month. The ticket sales are projected to be $250,000. I was going to replenish the accounts before the fiscal year ended. It was just a float. Gianna. Why do you have to make it sound so ugly? 'Cause it is ugly. Tessa said from the doorway. We all turned. Tessa stepped back into the foyer. The light from the hallway hit her face, illuminating the sharp angles of her rage. She didn't look at Grant. She looked straight at my mother. If it was a legitimate loan, Tessa said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly low register. Why didn't you write the check from the foundation directly to Grant? Why did you route it through Prestige Logistics? My mother opened her mouth. then closed it. She blinked rapidly. I will tell you why. Tessa continued, walking slowly back into the dining room. She moved like a prosecutor closing in on the witness stand. Because you knew it was wrong. You needed to wash the money. You needed to make it look like a vendor expense so the board wouldn't see a disbursement to your son. That is consciousness of guilt. Marianne. That is the legal definition of intent to defraud. It was just accounting. My mother whispered weakly. Complicated accounting. It was lying. Tessa corrected. And you made Grant the face of it. My mother looked around the room, desperate for an ally. She looked at Grant, who was staring at the floor. She looked at my father, who was staring at her with the horror of a man realizing he had slept next to a stranger for 3 decades. I did it for the family, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. I just wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted us to be happy. I watched her cry. I had seen her cry 1,000 times. I had seen her cry to get out of speeding tickets. I had seen her cry to get a discount on furniture. I had seen her cry to make me feel guilty for wanting to go to a sleepover. I felt nothing. I reached into my bag again. I pulled out a small stack of papers. They weren't legal documents. They weren't bank statements. They were just printouts from my personal email outbox. You didn't do it for the family, I said. And you certainly didn't do it because you thought you would get caught. You did it because you thought the only person who could catch you was a nobody. I slid the first paper across the table. It stopped right next to her wine glass. Do you know what this is? I asked. She wiped her eyes, sniffing theatrically. She glanced at the paper. It is an email. So what? It is an email I sent you 3 years ago, I said. The subject line is promotion and keynote speech. I invited you and Dad to come to Chicago. I was receiving the Investigator of the Year award from the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. I was giving a speech on the specific red flags of vendor fraud in charitable organizations. I paused. You never replied. You didn't even open it. I slid a second paper. This is the transcript of a voicemail I left you last Christmas. I told you I'd been appointed to the Oversight Committee for the West Coast Regional Audit Board. I told you my job was literally to catch people who invent fake companies. I looked at her. You called me back 2 days later and asked if I could send you money for a new patio set because you were a little short this month. My mother looked at the papers. Her face wasn't sad anymore. It was confused. I didn't know. She muttered. I thought you were just doing tax returns. You never explained it properly. I tried. I said I tried for 18 years. But you didn't hear me. You didn't see me. You looked at me and you saw a background character. You saw a nobody. And because you thought I was nothing, you assumed I was stupid. You assumed I wouldn't notice the patterns. You assumed that if you engaged in a massive financial crime in the same state where your daughter is a forensic accountant, you would be safe because your daughter doesn't matter. I leaned forward, my hands resting on the table. That is your fatal error, Mother. You thought my silence was weakness. You didn't realize I was just taking notes. My father picked up the email printout. His hands were shaking. He read the subject line. He read the date. I never saw this, he whispered. Gianna. I never saw this invite. Because Mom manages the family email, Grant said dully. Just like she manages the bank accounts. Just like she manages us. My mother slammed her hand down again. Stop it. All of you. Stop acting like I am a monster. I made a mistake. Okay. I made a mistake. But I am still your mother. I am still the person who wiped your noses and cooked your meals. She turned her eyes on me, narrowing them into slits. And you? She hissed. You are enjoying this. You came here to destroy me. You held on to this file just to drop it tonight. You want to ruin Grant's wedding. You want to embarrass us in front of Tessa. You are vindictive. Gianna. If I wanted to be vindictive, I said calmly, I would have let the FBI raid the house during the ceremony. I am giving you a way out. A way out? She laughed bitterly. You are asking me to resign. You are asking me to admit I am a thief. That is not a way out. That is social suicide. If I do that, the wedding is ruined anyway. Who is going to come to the wedding of the woman who embezzled the flower budget? She pointed a finger at me, jabbing the air. If you send that report, Gianna, you are the one canceling the wedding. You are the one breaking your brother's heart. It will be on your conscience, not mine. It was the classic pivot, the abuser's favorite trick. Look what you made me do. I looked at Grant. He was looking at me, waiting to see if I would buckle, waiting to see if the old programming would kick in, the programming that said, "Protect Mom. Keep the peace. Don't be the problem." I looked at the ring on the floor. No, I said. The word was simple. It hung in the air like a bell. I am not the one who stole the money, Mother, I said. And I am not the one who lied to Tessa. I am just the one who stopped holding the flashlight for you while you dug the hole. I picked up my tablet. The wedding isn't being ruined by a report. It is being ruined because it was paid for with crime. And I am not going to let you use family as a shield anymore. You lost the right to that shield when you framed your son for a felony. My mother's face twisted. She looked like she was about to scream, to launch into another tirade, to burn the house down with her words. But then a small electronic beep cut through the tension. We all turned. Tessa was standing by the sideboard. She was holding her phone up. It wasn't the flashlight this time. The screen was dark. But the red recording indicator was pulsing steadily. My mother stared at the phone. What are you doing? Tessa didn't lower the phone. Her voice was ice cold. Professional. The voice of a woman who had just survived a near miss with a fatal disaster. I am protecting myself, Tessa said. Grant, you might want to listen to this part carefully. Tessa took a step closer to my mother. She didn't look afraid anymore. She looked efficient. Mrs. Marian, Tessa said. Her voice clear and loud enough for the microphone to pick up every syllable. I need you to clarify one thing for the record right now before I walk out that door and call my own lawyer. My mother looked at the phone, then at Tessa. Fear true and primal began to pool in her eyes. Tessa, put that away. We are family. We are not family, Tessa said. And we never will be. Now answer the question. Tessa paused, letting the silence stretch, forcing my mother to lean in, forcing the room to hold its breath. You claimed earlier that the transfers to Prestige Logistics were loans, Tessa said. But Gianna has documentation of personal expenses. The watch, the ring, the patio set. Tessa leaned in. The phone inches from my mother's face. I need you to confirm right now. Did you, Marian Armstrong, knowingly use funds from the Cedar Hollow Hope Gala to pay for your personal lifestyle expenses without the knowledge or consent of the board? My mother's mouth opened. She looked at me. I was holding the tablet that contained her prison sentence. She looked at Grant. He was looking at the floor. Broken. She looked at her husband. He had turned his back on her. She looked back at the phone. The color drained from her face until she looked like a ghost. She realized there was no spin left. There was no administrative error. There was only the recording and the truth. My mother started. Her voice a raspy whisper. I needed the recording indicator on Tessa's phone pulsed like a red heartbeat in the silent room. My mother stared at it. Her mouth half open. The words trapped in her throat. Then the dam broke. But it was not the dignified, silent weeping of a martyr. It was the ugly gasping panic of a woman watching her portrait melt in a fire. Marian Armstrong buried her face in her hands and wailed. It was a sound of pure terror. Not because she felt guilty for stealing, but because she realized the audience had finally seen behind the curtain. The lighting had been turned up. The makeup had been wiped off, and she was terrified of what she looked like in the harsh clarity of the truth. I had to, she sobbed, her voice muffled by her palms. I had to keep up. The gala costs more every year. The flowers. The band. The catering. The donors expected magic. And magic is expensive. I was drowning. Grant. I was drowning in expectations. She looked up. Mascara running down her cheeks in black rivulets. She reached out toward Grant, her hands shaking. I did it for you. So you could be proud of this family. So you wouldn't be embarrassed to say you were an Armstrong. Grant stood up. He moved slowly like an old man. He looked at the woman sobbing at the head of the table. For 38 years. He had been her soldier. He had defended her. Excused her. And smoothed over her edges. He had told me to be quieter. To be nicer. To just go along with it. But the diamond ring on the floor had severed the cord. Stop, Grant said. His voice was not loud, but it was devoid of the warmth that usually defined him. Stop saying you did it for me. But I did, she pleaded. The watch. The down payment. It was all for you. No, Grant said. He looked at Tessa, who was still holding the phone steady, her face like stone. Then he looked back at our mother. You did it so you could brag about me. There is a difference. You bought me things with stolen money so you could tell your friends that your son was successful. You made me a prop in your play, Mom. And you made me an accomplice. He took a breath, his chest heaving. Answer Tessa's question for the recording. Did you take the money? Grant. Please. She whispered. Answer her. Grant roared. It was a sound I had never heard from my brother. It echoed off the walls, shaking the crystal in the cabinet. Did you take the money from the charity account for personal use? Yes or no? My mother flinched as if he had hit her. She looked at the red light on the phone. She looked at the tablet in front of me. She looked at the walls of the house she had furnished with lies. Yes, she whispered. The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I borrowed it, she added quickly, her desperation kicking in again. It was just a float. Just to cover the credit cards until the next fundraiser. I was going to pay it back. I swear I was going to pay it back next month. You said you were going to pay it back in 2019. I said. My voice cut through her frantic rambling. I tapped the screen of my tablet. I have the ledger here. Mother. You took $50,000 in 2019 for consulting. You never paid it back. You took $30,000 in 2020 for venue deposits that went to a personal travel agent. You never paid it back. This wasn't a loan. It was a salary you paid yourself for a volunteer position, and you hid it because you knew it was theft. My father stood up from the table. He had been a ghost in this house for as long as I could remember. He was the man who sat in the corner chair reading the paper, letting the storm of my mother's personality rage around him. He had chosen survival over integrity. He walked over to where my mother was sitting. He looked down at her. Darren, she whimpered, reaching for his hand. Tell them. Tell them I am a good person. Tell them how hard I work. My father did not take her hand. He pulled his arm back, keeping it tight against his side. Can't, he said. His voice was rusty, but it was steady. I can't tell them that anymore. Marian. What? She stared at him. Betrayed. You are my husband. You are supposed to support me. I have supported you, he said, for 40 years. I supported you when you cut off your sister because she didn't dress well enough. I supported you when you bullied Gianna out of this house. I supported you every time you needed to be the most important person in the room. He looked at me. His eyes were wet in my silence. He said, his voice breaking. Helped you do this? If I had spoken up 10 years ago when I first saw the new car we couldn't afford, Maybe we wouldn't be here. I let you think you were above the rules. He looked back at her. I am done being silent, Marian. And I am done being part of the lie. My mother looked around the room. Her husband. Her son. Her daughter. Her prospective daughter-in-law. Every single pillar of her support system had crumbled in the span of 1 hour. You are all against me, she hissed, her sorrow hardening back into spite. After everything I have done, you are ungrateful. All of you. I picked up the tablet. I stood up. We are not ungrateful, I said. We are exhausted. I walked over to her. I placed the tablet on the table in front of her, the screen glowing with the draft of the report. Here is the reality, I said. I am leaving tonight. I'm going back to Seattle tomorrow morning. I looked at my watch. It is 8:30 p.m. You have 12 hours. 12 hours for what? She asked, wiping her nose with a napkin. To liquidate. I said. You have jewelry in that safe upstairs. You have this house. You have the lake cabin. You need to call a lawyer. And you need to call the bank by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I need a confirmation that you have wire transferred the full amount of the missing funds, $642,000, back into the Cedar Hollow Hope Gala account. Her eyes widened. I can't raise that much cash in 12 hours. Then you better start making phone calls, I said coldly, because at 9 o'clock I hit send on this report. And if the money isn't back in the account, the recommendation will be for immediate federal indictment. I leaned in closer. And there is one more thing, I said. You will draft a letter of resignation from the board, effective immediately, citing health reasons or whatever lie you want to tell the neighbors. But you will never sign a check for a charity again. If I see your name on so much as a bake sale flyer, I will reopen the file. You are destroying me, she whispered. If I resign, everyone will talk. They will know. They will suspect. I corrected. But if I file the report, they will know for sure. It is your choice. Mother, you can keep your freedom or you can keep your pride. You can't have both. Tessa stepped forward. She stopped the recording on her phone. She tapped the screen, saving the file to the cloud. I knew she was sending it to a secure server. I think we are done here, Tessa said. She looked at Grant. He was standing by the window, looking at the ring on the floor. He looked like a man who had survived a car crash but hadn't checked for internal bleeding yet. Tessa, Grant said. He didn't move toward her. He knew better. I am sorry. I know you are, Tessa said. Her voice was sad, but firm. You are a good man, Grant. But you are a weak man. And right now I need someone who can stand up to a storm, not someone who hides behind it. She looked at the table at the untouched engagement dinner. I can't marry into this, she said. I can't build a life on a foundation that is rotting. If I stayed, every time you bought me a gift, I would wonder who paid for it. Every time your mother smiled at me, I would wonder what she was hiding. I can't live like that. She turned to me. Gianna. Thank you. For what? I asked. For having the courage to light the match, she said. She turned and walked out the door. We heard her heels clicking on the pavement, then the sound of a car door opening, the engine starting, and the tires crunching on the gravel as she drove away. Grant didn't chase her. He knew it was over. He sank into a chair, put his head in his hands, and wept. My mother looked at me. She was trembling. The fight had gone out of her. She looked old. Gianna, she said. Her voice was small. She reached out a hand across the table, palm up. Gianna. Please. I am your mother. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I gave you life. I looked at her hand. I remembered how that hand had pushed me away when I wanted a hug. I remembered how it had waved dismissively when I tried to speak. I remembered how it had thrown my awards in the trash. Means everything, I said. It means I learned exactly what kind of person I didn't want to be. I loved you. She sobbed. In my own way. I loved you. No, I said. You loved the idea of a family. You loved the picture on the Christmas card. You never loved the people in the picture. You only loved how we made you look. I pulled the strap of my bag onto my shoulder. You called me a nobody, I said. You told the neighbors I would never amount to anything. You told Tessa I was just a receptionist. I looked around the room at the father who had finally found his voice, at the brother who was finally facing his reality, and at the mother who was finally facing her consequences. But look around. Mother, I said softly. Grant is falling apart. Dad is broken. You are a criminal. I leaned down so my face was level with hers. I am the only person in this room who is standing up straight. I am the only one who isn't afraid of the light. You called me a nobody. But you just proved that I am the only one here taking responsibility. I stood up. I didn't wait for her response. There was nothing left to say. The audit was complete. The findings were conclusive. I walked out of the dining room down the hallway where the poster of the gala still hung in its glass cabinet. I walked out the front door into the cool night air. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back at the house. I just pulled the handle until I heard the soft, decisive click of the latch engaging. It was the sound of a case closing. I walked to my rental car, got in, and drove away. I didn't know if she would pay the money back. I didn't know if Grant would recover. I didn't know if my father would leave her. Those were their variables to solve. I had done my job. I had balanced the ledger. And for the first time in 36 years, as I drove past the Welcome to Cedar Hollow sign in my rearview mirror, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt real. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Maya Revenge Stories. I would love to hear your thoughts. Where are you listening from right now? Please drop a comment below with your location. Hit that like button if you enjoyed the justice served. And don't forget to press the hype button to help this story reach more people.